My husband called me while I was visiting friends. I'm divorcing you, and I've sold our business to start over with my new partner. He laughed. I replied calmly, good for you. When I got home, his cocky smile vanished. I'm divorcing you, he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. That's funny, I replied, because I've just finished transferring our assets. I hung up the phone, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Ryan's laughter still echoed in my ears, that same arrogant chuckle he'd used during business negotiations when he thought he had the upper hand. 15 years of marriage had taught me to recognize the subtle shifts in his voice, the slight tremor that betrayed his nervousness even as he tried to sound confident. Want to see how she dismantles his empire piece by piece? Subscribe now, it's free. Join thousands of readers who know the sweetest payback comes from playing it smart, not safe. Hit that subscribe button and be part of the next calculated comeback. The irony wasn't lost on me. While he was announcing his grand exit, I was sitting in our corporate lawyer's office, finalizing the documentation that would protect everything we'd built together, or rather, everything I'd built while he played the charismatic frontman. Are you sure about this, Mrs. Harrison? David, our lawyer, looked at me with concern as he organized the papers spread across his mahogany desk. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied, signing the last document with a flourish. And please, call me Sarah. The drive home felt surreal. Memories flooded back. The late nights spent perfecting our business model, the countless spreadsheets I'd prepared while Ryan charmed potential clients. He never knew I'd kept detailed records of every transaction, every questionable decision, every time he dipped into company funds for personal expenses. When I pulled into our driveway, his sports car was already there. Showtime. I took a deep breath, grabbed my briefcase, and walked through the front door with measured steps. Ryan was waiting in the living room, sprawled on our Italian leather sofa like a king on his throne. His new partner, Jessica, stood by the window, her red dress a stark contrast against the evening sky. The smile on his face spoke volumes. He thought he had won. Sarah, darling, he drawled, I believe we have some matters to discuss. I set my briefcase on the coffee table with deliberate slowness. Yes, we do. I've already spoken with our lawyers. The divorce papers will be ready tomorrow, and I found a buyer for the business. Jessica and I... That's interesting, I interrupted, pulling out a thick folder, because according to these documents, you don't have the authority to sell anything. The cockiness in his expression wavered. What are you talking about? You see, Ryan, while you were busy being the face of Harrison Enterprises, I was quietly becoming its backbone. I spread out the papers, watching his eyes widen as he recognized the legal documents. As majority shareholder and co-owner, I'm afraid any sale would require my approval. Jessica stepped forward, her confident demeanor cracking slightly. Ryan told me he owned controlling interest. Ryan has a habit of telling people what they want to hear. I turned to her. Did he also tell you about the $500,000 he embezzled last year, or the falsified contracts with overseas suppliers? The color drained from his face. You're bluffing. I pulled out another file. The SEC would be very interested in these transactions, as would the IRS. Jessica's eyes darted between us, her earlier smugness replaced by growing panic. Ryan, what is she talking about? Nothing, he snapped, but his voice had lost its edge. She's making things up. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned from him. All teeth, no warmth. The board meeting tomorrow morning should be interesting. I've prepared a detailed presentation on the company's financial irregularities. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. You'd be destroying everything we built. No, Ryan. I'm protecting what I built while you were busy planning your exit strategy. I turned to Jessica. By the way, how much did he promise you from the company sale? She stepped back, grabbing her purse. I need to make some calls. As she hurried out, the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floors echoed through the room. The sound echoed through the sudden silence. Ryan sat there, deflated, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. I'll leave you to process this, I said, gathering my documents. Oh, and don't bother coming to the office tomorrow. Your access has been revoked and security has been notified. I walked toward the stairs, pausing at the bottom step. You know what the funny thing is, Ryan? If you had just asked for a divorce, I would have given you a fair settlement. But you got greedy. You thought you could take everything and leave me with nothing. He looked up, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the man I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain. But it was too late for that. The divorce papers will be ready next week, I continued. My terms, and don't worry about the business. I'll make sure it thrives. After all, I've been running it all along. As I climbed the stairs to pack my things, I felt lighter than I had in years. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: damage control, PR statements, reassuring investors. But for now, I savored the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying everything. Sometimes it's about finally claiming what was yours all along. I heard the front door slam as Ryan left, and I smiled. He always did have a flair for dramatic exits, but this time, I was the one writing the ending. The morning after Ryan's dramatic exit, I was back in my element at the World Cybersecurity Conference in San Francisco. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from concerned colleagues who'd heard rumors about Harrison Enterprises' impending sale. Only they knew. Sarah Harrison, a familiar voice called out as I navigated through the conference hall. It was Marcus Chin, my old colleague from the FBI Cybercrime Division. I wasn't expecting to see you here given the circumstances. I smiled, adjusting my conference badge. The circumstances are precisely why I'm here, Marcus. Remember that backdoor tracking system we developed during my consulting days? His eyes widened with understanding. You didn't... Let's just say I never completely retired from cybersecurity. I pulled out my laptop, opening a program I'd been refining for years. While Ryan was busy playing CEO, I kept our digital infrastructure under careful surveillance. The screen filled with data streams, every email, every transaction, every deleted file from the past 5 years. Marcus whistled low as he saw the depth of information. He never questioned why our systems were so secure. I continued typing rapidly, too busy crafting his exit strategy with Jessica to notice the digital breadcrumbs they were leaving behind. The evidence was damning: encrypted emails between Ryan and Jessica dating back 18 months, transfer requests to offshore accounts, doctored financial statements prepared for potential buyers. But the real gem was Jessica's background, a history of corporate espionage that Ryan had conveniently overlooked. Your husband really knows how to pick them, Marcus commented, scanning Jessica's file. She's been involved in 3 corporate takeovers in the last 5 years. Always the same pattern: get close to the CEO, orchestrate a quick sale, disappear with the assets. I leaned back, feeling a grim satisfaction, except this time, she picked the wrong company. Over the next few hours, I methodically prepared data packages for key stakeholders. The board members received detailed reports of Ryan's financial manipulations. Our major clients got notifications about attempted unauthorized transfers. The SEC received an anonymous tip about suspicious trading patterns. By evening, my phone was ringing nonstop. Ryan's carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing. His new ventures investors were pulling out, spooked by the sudden flood of red flags in their due diligence reports. Jessica had vanished, probably on to her next target, leaving Ryan to face the music alone. Mrs. Harrison, my assistant's voice crackled through the phone. Mr. Davidson from the board is requesting an emergency meeting, and the SEC has sent investigators to the office. Perfect timing, I replied, packing up my equipment. Tell them I'll be there in an hour. As I drove back to the office, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Ryan had always dismissed my excessive focus on cybersecurity as paranoia. We're not the naive ones, I thought, gripping the wheel. Darling, he'd say patronizingly, we're just a regular business. But in today's world, information is power. Every digital footprint tells a story, and I had been collecting stories for years, not out of paranoia, but out of preparation. Because in my experience, people who think they're above the rules eventually try to break them. The office was buzzing when I arrived. SEC investigators occupied the conference room, surrounded by boxes of documents. Board members huddled in corners, whispering urgently. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Ryan. His expensive suit wrinkled, his confidence shattered. "What did you do?" he hissed as I passed him. I paused, remembering all the times he'd interrupted my technical explanations with that condescending smile. "I protected our company, Ryan, something you should have thought about before trying to sell it from under me." His face contorted with anger, but before he could respond, an investigator called him into the conference room. I watched him go, knowing that his reputation in the business community was already in tatters. No one trusts a CEO who can't protect their own company's digital assets. As I settled into my office preparing for the long night ahead, a message popped up on my screen. It was from Jessica, routed through multiple servers. Well played. I smiled, typing a quick response. Better luck next time, but maybe pick a target who doesn't know how to follow the breadcrumbs. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about illumination. And in the digital age, there's nowhere to hide from the truth when someone knows where to look. The charity board meeting at the Metropolitan Museum was interrupted by concerned whispers and furtive glances at phones. News of Harrison Enterprises' upheaval had spread through the city's elite circles like wildfire. As chairwoman of the Business Ethics Committee, the irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah. Elizabeth Morton, head of the charity board, touched my arm gently. Perhaps we should reschedule in light of recent events. I shook my head, straightening the papers before me. On the contrary, Elizabeth, this is exactly where I need to be. I pulled out a leather-bound portfolio, one I'd been compiling for 3 years. In fact, I have something the board should see. The portfolio contained more than just company records. It held a meticulously documented history of every questionable deal, every manipulated contract, every client meeting that was actually a rendezvous with Jessica. But more importantly, it contained evidence of something far more sinister. A pattern of systematic financial manipulation stretched across multiple companies. These documents, I began addressing the stunned board members, show a connection between Ryan's activities and several failed corporate takeovers in the past 5 years. Each followed the same pattern: rapid acquisition, asset stripping, and abandonment. The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence. Years of careful observation, detailed notes, and strategic relationships with industry contacts had painted a clear picture. Ryan and Jessica weren't just planning to sell our company, they were part of a larger scheme to destroy it from within. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus at the FBI Cybercrime Division. International alerts are active. Their accounts are being monitored. Perfect timing. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, I've already shared this information with the relevant authorities, but I wanted this board to understand why Harrison Enterprises will be undergoing some significant changes in the coming weeks. As if on cue, my assistant texted. Interpol just flagged suspicious transactions from Mr. Harrison's private account to a bank in the Cayman Islands. The pieces were falling into place like a perfectly orchestrated symphony. While Ryan had been plotting his grand escape, I had been building a network of allies, regulatory officials, industry leaders, and financial investigators. They had been watching and waiting for exactly this kind of operation. Elizabeth looked concerned. How long have you known about this? Long enough, I said, to ensure that when the truth came out, it would be undeniable. I closed the portfolio. Ryan had always underestimated the power of patience. He thought business was about quick wins and faster exits. But some of us play the long game. By evening, the news had broken internationally. Headlines screamed about potential money laundering connections, and financial watchdogs across 3 continents were investigating the web of shell companies Ryan had created. His new venture, barely launched, was already toxic to investors. Back at the office, I found Ryan waiting in my parking spot, his expensive suit replaced by casual wear that couldn't hide his desperation. "You've destroyed everything," he spat. "Years of work, all our connections." "No, Ryan," I interrupted calmly. "I've protected everything. The company, our employees, our legitimate clients. The only thing I've destroyed is your ability to do this to someone else." His face contorted. Jessica was right. We should have moved faster. Taken control before. Before what? I cut in. Before I could reveal that your new partner has been under investigation for corporate fraud in 3 countries, or before your offshore accounts were frozen. The color drained from his face. "What did you say about the accounts?" I checked my watch. "Oh, that should be happening right about now. Interpol doesn't mess around with international financial crimes." As if to confirm my words, his phone began ringing. From his expression, I knew it wasn't good news. He answered, walking away quickly, his free hand running through his hair in that nervous gesture I knew so well. I watched him go, feeling not triumph, but a kind of sad satisfaction. The long game wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring that patterns of destruction couldn't continue unchecked. My phone buzzed again. SEC wants to meet tomorrow. They're impressed with the documentation. I smiled, heading into the building. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, I had a company to rebuild and a legacy to protect. After all, the longest game of all is the one where everybody wins except those who try to cheat the system. The next morning found me in Zurich, the crisp Swiss air a stark contrast to the heated chaos back home. While Ryan was dealing with Interpol, I had a different meeting, one that would unravel the last threads of his carefully woven deception. Hans Weber, my contact at the International Financial Commission, greeted me with characteristic Swiss precision. "Mrs. Harrison, your timing is impeccable. The accounts you flagged have shown significant activity in the past 24 hours. I spread my laptop open on his immaculate desk, pulling up the forensic accounting software I developed during my years of quiet observation. "They're panicking, Hans. Watch this." Together, we traced the digital breadcrumbs through a maze of shell companies. Ryan had been clever, but not clever enough. His fatal flaw was assuming that no one would look beyond the surface, that no one would connect the dots between seemingly unrelated transactions. Here, I pointed to a cluster of transfers. Every third Friday, exactly 2.3% of our company's gross profits would vanish into what looked like operational costs. But follow the money. Hans leaned forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He goes through 7 different entities before landing in, very clever, a series of cryptocurrency wallets. And from there, I continued typing rapidly into these offshore accounts, each registered to companies that don't technically exist. The screen filled with transaction records, a digital map of betrayal that stretched across continents. Ryan hadn't just been planning to sell our company. He'd been systematically draining it for years, building a secret fortune he thought no one would ever find. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus at the FBI. "Global asset freeze initiated. All identified accounts locked." I allowed myself a small smile. "Now, Hans, watch what happens when we trigger the regulatory alerts." With a few keystrokes, I sent the compiled evidence to financial authorities in 12 countries simultaneously. The reaction was immediate. Warning flags popped up across the banking network as algorithms detected the patterns we'd uncovered. "Mrs. Harrison," Hans said slowly, "this is comprehensive. You've been planning this for quite some time." "Since the day I noticed the first discrepancy," I admitted. Ryan thought his background in traditional banking made him untraceable. He never understood that in today's world, every digital transaction leaves a fingerprint. My phone rang. It was Jessica, of all people. I put it on speaker. "You knew," she said without preamble. "You knew all along about the accounts in Geneva, Malta, and Singapore, and those clever little trusts in the Caymans." I kept my voice level. "Tell Ryan his crypto wallets aren't as anonymous as he thought." She laughed, a hollow sound. "He can't tell me anything right now. He's in a meeting with federal investigators." How unfortunate. I glanced at Hans, who was already making notes. "You might want to schedule a similar meeting. Your trading patterns over the last 18 months have raised some interesting questions." The line went dead. Hans raised an eyebrow. "She'll run." "Let her," I replied, closing my laptop. "Every account she touches, every transaction she makes, will only strengthen our case." By evening, the financial world was buzzing with the news. Headlines screamed about hidden assets and international investigations. Ryan's carefully constructed network of shell companies was collapsing like dominoes, each failure exposing more connections, more deceptions. Back in my hotel room, I received an encrypted message from our company's board. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. Full audit approved, new security protocols in place." I poured myself a glass of Swiss wine, watching the lights of Zurich twinkle below. Ryan had always mocked my attention to detail, my insistence on understanding every aspect of our financial operations. "You're wasting your time," he'd say. "That's what we have accountants for." But forensic accounting isn't just about numbers. It's about patterns, about understanding the story that money tells when it moves in the shadows. And now, those patterns had become his undoing. My phone lit up with one final message for the night. From Hans. "Authorities have locked down all identified assets. Total amount frozen. 47.3 million euros. I smiled, raising my glass to the city lights. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's future. Sometimes it's about recovering what they thought they'd already stolen from the past. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more unraveling of financial webs. But for now, I savored the knowledge that in the world of hidden assets, nothing stays buried forever, especially when someone knows exactly where to dig. The morning sun was just breaking over Zurich's skyline when my phone erupted with urgent messages. Our biggest client, Maxwell Industries, was calling an emergency meeting. Perfect timing. I was already on my way to the airport. "Sarah, have you seen the news?" Victoria Chin from Maxwell Co. greeted me as I walked into their Manhattan headquarters 6 hours later. The jet lag was worth it just to see her expression. About Ryan's frozen assets, or about Jessica's disappearance? I settled into the conference room chair, noting the presence of several other major clients around the table. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a statement. Victoria's lips curved into a knowing smile about the fact that Harrison Enterprises was never actually for sale, despite what certain parties have been claiming. I pulled out my tablet, bringing up our client portfolio. That's actually why I wanted to meet with all of you today. Ryan wasn't just planning to sell the company, he was actively undermining our client relationships. The room fell silent as I displayed emails showing Ryan's attempts to poach our top clients for his new venture. Proposals with inflated numbers, promises he could never keep, and worst of all, manipulated data about our company's performance. He approached me last week. James Morrison, our second largest client, spoke up. The numbers seemed too good to be true. Now I know why. Because they were fabricated. I confirmed it, I said, swiping to the next screen. But here are our actual performance metrics. For the past 5 years, notice the difference. Victoria leaned forward, eyes sharp. Your real numbers are actually better than what he was showing. Ryan always believed in underselling and over-delivering. To himself. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. He was planning to take our client list to his new venture, promising impossible returns based on manipulated data. The meeting continued for hours as we went through every contract, every project, every deliverable. By the end, not only had we retained our entire client base, but several had committed to expanding their contracts. "Sarah," Victoria pulled me aside as the others filed out. "We never trusted Ryan. We trusted you. The company's success, that was all you." My phone buzzed. Another message from the authorities. Mr. Harrison spotted attempting to access frozen accounts in Singapore. Local authorities notified. I smiled grimly. Would you believe me if I said I knew this day would come? That's why every client contract had a secret clause, one that Ryan never bothered to read. Victoria's eyes widened. The loyalty provision. In the event of any attempted unauthorized transfer of client relationships, all contracts automatically renew with the original company leadership. I gathered my papers. Ryan thought he was stealing our client list. He didn't realize our clients had already chosen their side. Back at the office, the exodus had begun. Ryan's supporters, the few who remained, were clearing out their desks. The ones who stayed were the ones who'd known all along who really ran things. My assistant handed me a note. Mr. Harrison tried to access the client database. All attempts blocked. I walked through the office, stopping at each department, reassuring teams and outlining our path forward. The fear in their eyes was replaced by determination. This wasn't just a company, it was a community he tried to destroy. "Mrs. Harrison," a young analyst caught up with me. "The clients are asking about the innovation pipeline you mentioned. They want to know if we're still on track." I smiled, remembering all the projects Ryan had dismissed as unnecessary expenses. "Tell them Phase 1 launches next week, right on schedule." As the day wound down, I received one final message from Jessica, routed through an anonymous server. "You never needed him, did you?" "No," I typed back. "But he needed our clients. Good luck finding new ones with your reputation." Looking out over the city skyline from my office, I felt a weight lift. The client list hadn't just been names in a database. It was a network of relationships built on trust, competence, and genuine value, something Ryan never understood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new growth. But for now, I savored the knowledge that in business, as in life, loyalty can't be bought or stolen. It has to be earned, one relationship at a time. And that was something Ryan could never take away. As the city lights began to twinkle in the evening sky, I found myself back in the company's legal archives, a place Ryan had mockingly called my second home. If only he'd known how right he was. The call from the forensic auditors came just as I was pulling out the last 5 years of quarterly reports. Mrs. Harrison, we found something concerning in the 2023 filings. Let me guess, I said, spreading documents across the archive room's massive oak table. The discrepancies start on page 47 of each report. There was a pause on the line. How did you? Because that's where Ryan always got sloppy. I pulled out my own set of records, the real ones, meticulously maintained and notarized. He never thought anyone would read that far into the financial statements. The beauty of paper trails is their permanence. While Ryan had been busy manipulating digital records, I'd been quietly documenting everything the old-fashioned way. Every falsified report had its genuine counterpart. Every doctored tax form had its authentic twin. My phone lit up with a message from our tax attorney. The IRS Special Investigation Unit wants to meet tomorrow. They're particularly interested in the offshore consulting fees. I smiled, remembering Ryan's so-called creative accounting. He had called them strategic international partnerships, shell companies that existed only on paper, billing millions for services never rendered. Send me everything you found, the auditor was saying. The SEC is particularly interested in the pattern of tax evasion. I figured, combined with systematic falsification of corporate records, I'm sending you the files now. Now that they knew exactly how he did it, the evidence was damning. Years of fraudulent tax returns, fabricated business expenses, and hidden income streams, all documented in perfect detail. Ryan had been so focused on covering his digital tracks that he'd forgotten about the paper ones. My assistant knocked on the archive door. Mrs. Harrison, the regulatory compliance team is here, and Mr. Harrison's lawyer called. Let me guess, I said. They want to negotiate. She nodded. They're offering to withdraw all claims to the company in exchange for... No deals, I interrupted, pulling out another stack of documents. Send these to the SEC immediately. Priority courier. These weren't just any papers. They were the smoking gun. Every fraudulent transaction had left a trace. Every false statement, a contradiction. Ryan's new partner's criminal history was there too, buried in regulatory filings from 3 different countries. My phone buzzed again. Marcus from the FBI. Your documentation is extraordinary. How long have you been keeping these records? Since the day he first adjusted our quarterly earnings, I replied. Some people keep diary entries. I keep paper trails. The next morning, the headlines were brutal. Harrison Enterprises Company faces federal investigation. Tax fraud scheme exposed. Corporate records reveal years of deception. Ryan's lawyer was waiting in my office, looking considerably less confident than usual. Mrs. Harrison, my client is willing to... I held up my hand, sliding a thick folder across the desk. These are the original documents showing systematic tax evasion over the past 5 years. The authorities already have copies. His face paled as he flipped through the pages. This would mean federal charges. Yes, but that's not my concern anymore. I stood, gathering my things for the SEC meeting. Your client made his choices. Now he can face the consequences. As I left for the federal building, my phone lit up one last time. A message from Jessica, probably from somewhere beyond extradition. I should have checked the paper records. Yes, I typed back. You should have. The SEC investigators were thorough, professional, and clearly impressed by the documentation I'd maintained. Every question they asked, I had the paper to back up my answers. Every allegation they raised, I had the evidence to support. By evening, the wheels of justice were turning at full speed. Ryan's assets were frozen, his passport flagged, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own deceptions. Back in the archive room, I ran my hand over the rows of filed documents. Ryan had always laughed at my insistence on keeping paper records in a digital age. Nobody does that anymore, he'd say. But paper doesn't lie. It doesn't crash, doesn't get hacked, doesn't disappear with a click. And most importantly, it tells stories. Stories of greed, of deception, and ultimately, of justice. Tomorrow would bring more investigations, more revelations, more consequences. But for now, I took comfort in knowing that sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't revenge, it's simply the truth. Preserved one page at a time. While the SEC was combing through our paper trail, I found myself at the annual Global Business Summit, an event Ryan had always dominated with his charisma. This year, however, the whispers that followed me through the convention center had a different tone. Sarah Harrison. Bernard Walsh, CEO of our largest competitor, intercepted me by the keynote stage. I believe we have some matters to discuss. I checked my phone, another update from the authorities about Ryan's failed attempts to access frozen accounts. Indeed we do, Bernard, particularly about those merger talks Ryan initiated last month. His eyebrows shot up. How did you know about the confidential meetings? I led him to a quiet corner. The same way I know about the falsified projections, I said. He showed you? Tell me, did the numbers seem a bit too perfect? Bernard's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. We thought something was off. The growth predictions, the market share calculations, all fabricated, I confirmed, pulling up the real data on my tablet. But here's what's interesting. While Ryan was trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover through you, he was feeding similar false information to every major player in the industry. The summit became my war room. One by one, I met with industry leaders, sharing the truth behind Ryan's elaborate scheme. He hadn't just planned to sell our company, he'd been playing the entire industry against itself, creating a bidding war based on lies. My phone buzzed. A message from Victoria Chin. Market analysts are starting to connect the dots. Ryan's new venture stock is in free fall. Perfect timing. I had just finished briefing the Industry Ethics Committee when the news broke. Market manipulation scheme exposed. Multiple companies targeted. Sarah. Bernard caught up with me again as I was leaving the main hall. The industry coalition wants to issue a joint statement. We need to present a united front. I smiled, remembering all the times Ryan had dismissed industry cooperation as weakness. Send me the draft. And, Bernard, check your merger documentation. Page 23 might interest you. Back at my hotel room, the pieces were falling into place. Industry support was crystallizing, not around Ryan's promises of quick profits, but around the truth and the need to protect the market from similar schemes. My assistant's message flashed on screen. Competitors are withdrawing from all negotiations initiated by Mr. Harrison. His new venture's funding is collapsing. I opened my laptop, connecting to a secure video call with our board. The screen filled with familiar faces, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. The industry response has been unanimous, I reported. Every major player has agreed to share information about Ryan's approaches. The pattern is clear, I continued. He was setting up a massive market manipulation play. And Jessica? One board member asked. Currently being investigated by market regulators in 3 countries. I pulled up her file. Turns out this wasn't her first attempt at industry-wide manipulation. The strategy was working perfectly. By exposing Ryan's schemes to the industry as a whole, we weren't just protecting our company. We were inoculating the entire market against his tactics. A final message came through as the day ended. From Ryan himself. You've turned everyone against me. No, I typed back. You did that yourself. I just showed them the truth. Looking out over the city from my hotel balcony, I reflected on how Ryan had never understood the real strength of business relationships. He saw every interaction as a transaction, every relationship as a leverage. But in this industry, reputation and trust were everything. By trying to play everyone against each other, he'd only succeeded in uniting them against himself. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more alliances, more strengthening of industry safeguards. But for now, I savored the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's plans, it's about showing everyone exactly who they really are. My phone lit up one last time. A message from the Industry Ethics Committee. New protocols being implemented across the sector. Thank you for bringing this to light. I smiled, raising my coffee cup to the dawn. In the end, Ryan's greatest mistake wasn't betraying me. It was underestimating the power of industry solidarity, and that was a mistake he would never have the chance to make again. Dawn had barely broken over the city when I stepped into the SEC's Manhattan office. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. While Ryan was dealing with the industry fallout, I was about to unleash the final phase of his undoing. Mrs. Harrison. Agent Thompson greeted me, leading me through security. We've reviewed the preliminary evidence you provided. It's extensive. I placed my briefcase on the conference room table, extracting a series of encrypted drives. What you've seen is just the surface. These contain 5 years of documented corporate fraud, including evidence of systemic market manipulation. The room filled with federal investigators, each armed with laptops and grim expressions. As I walked them through the evidence, their expression shifted from professional interest to stunned disbelief. "He really thought he could get away with this," one investigator murmured, scrolling through the transaction records. "He thought nobody was watching," I corrected, pulling up another file. "But I've been gathering evidence since the first red flag appeared in our books." My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus at the FBI International Task Force assembled. "Ready when you are." The timing was orchestrated perfectly. As I presented the evidence to the SEC, similar briefings were happening at regulatory agencies across 3 continents. Every fraudulent transaction, every manipulated report, every secret deal, all exposed simultaneously. "This goes beyond corporate fraud," Agent Thompson said, studying a particularly damning series of documents. "We're looking at potential RICO charges." I nodded, remembering all the times Ryan had dismissed compliance meetings as bureaucratic nonsense. "Check the offshore accounts linked to these shell companies. You'll find connections to some interesting parties." The evidence was irrefutable: years of witness statements, recorded conversations, and documented violations, all meticulously compiled and cross-referenced. Ryan hadn't just broken corporate laws, he had created an entire shadow operation. My assistant's urgent message flashed on screen. "Federal agents just arrived at Mr. Harrison's new office." Perfect. I pulled up the final piece of evidence, the smoking gun that would seal his fate. "This is the original recording of Ryan discussing his plans with Jessica. Notice the date, 6 months before he tried to sell the company." The room fell silent as the audio played. Ryan's voice, casual and arrogant, detailed his scheme to defraud investors, manipulate markets, and escape with millions. It was the kind of evidence prosecutors dream about. "Mrs. Harrison," Agent Thompson leaned forward, "you understand that as a whistleblower, you're entitled to certain protections." "I'm not interested in protection," I interrupted, pulling out one last file. "I'm interested in justice, and these documents prove that Ryan's operation extends far beyond our company." The investigation expanded rapidly. By afternoon, news channels were running breaking stories about a major corporate fraud investigation. Ryan's name was plastered across financial networks, his empire crumbling in real time. A message from Victoria Chin lit up my phone. "Just saw the news. The entire business community is in shock." I smiled grimly, watching federal agents exit the building with boxes of evidence. "The shock's only beginning," I typed back. "Wait until they see what's in those records." Back at the office, the mood was tense but determined. Employees gathered in groups, watching the news unfold. They'd known something was wrong, but the scale of Ryan's deception was still staggering. My final task of the day was a video call with the federal prosecutor. "The case is solid," she assured me. "Multiple charges, multiple jurisdictions. He's not walking away from this." As night fell over the city, I received one last message from Jessica, probably from some non-extradition country. "You were recording everything, weren't you?" "Not everything," I replied. "Just the important parts, like the day you both planned to destroy everything we built." Looking out over the cityscape, I thought about all the nights I'd spent gathering evidence, building my case, waiting for the right moment. Ryan had always said I was too cautious, too focused on details, but sometimes the details are what matter most. Sometimes the truth just needs a voice willing to speak it. Tomorrow would bring indictments, arrests, and the beginning of a long legal process. But for now, I took satisfaction in knowing that justice doesn't always require revenge. Sometimes it just requires courage, patience, and a willingness to stand up and blow the whistle. The morning after the federal investigation went public, I found myself at the Silicon Valley Tech Summit, surrounded by the digital elite. While Ryan was being processed by authorities, I was about to reveal the true extent of our company's technological capabilities, the ones he'd always dismissed as unnecessary expenses. "Mrs. Harrison," called out Aiden Zhang, CEO of Asia's largest tech conglomerate. "Your blockchain analysis of the cryptocurrency transfers was brilliant. How long have you been developing that technology?" I smiled, pulling up our proprietary software on my tablet. "Remember that cybersecurity initiative Ryan tried to shut down 3 years ago? This is what it evolved into." The presentation screen lit up, revealing a complex web of cryptocurrency transactions, a digital map of Ryan and Jessica's attempts to hide their stolen assets. Every transfer, every wallet, every attempt at concealment was clearly exposed. "The beauty of blockchain," I explained to the captivated audience, "is that it never forgets. They thought cryptocurrency would make them untraceable. Instead, it created a permanent record of their crimes. My phone buzzed. A message from our dev team. New suspicious activity detected. Mr. Harrison's associates attempting to access digital wallets through proxy servers. Perfect. I switched screens, showing the real-time tracking of their desperate attempts to salvage their hidden funds. Watch this, I told the assembled tech leaders. With a few keystrokes, I activated our blockchain security protocols. One by one, the digital pathways closed, the cryptocurrency wallets frozen, the escape routes sealed. It was like watching a digital noose tighten. Incredible, breathed Aiden. Your system isn't just tracking them, it's predicting their moves. Machine learning, I explained, fed by years of monitoring their patterns. Ryan never understood why I insisted on maintaining our own tech division. He thought we could just outsource everything. The summit became a showcase for our technological capabilities. While Ryan had been playing with traditional finance, I'd been building a digital empire capable of tracking, tracing, and securing assets across the global digital landscape. My assistant's message flashed urgently. Their last crypto wallet just went dark. Total assets secured, $43.7 million. I nodded, turning back to the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing isn't just corporate security, it's the future of financial tracking and protection. The tech community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Partnership offers flooded in, companies eager to implement our security systems. Ryan's attempt to destroy us had instead revealed our true strength. Sarah, Aiden caught up with me after the presentation. The Asian markets are buzzing. Your company's stock is soaring. I checked the numbers on my phone, watching our market value climb. Amazing what happens when you invest in innovation instead of deception. Back in the command center we'd set up, our tech team was tracking the last desperate attempts by Ryan's associates to access their digital assets. Each attempt was met with an impenetrable wall of security protocols. My phone lit up with a message from the Federal Cybercrimes Unit. Your system just prevented a major cryptocurrency theft attempt. We need this technology. I smiled, remembering Ryan's mockery of our tech investments. Send me the details. We'll set up a secure implementation team. As evening fell, I received one final notification, a failed login attempt from what was presumably Jessica's location. Access denied. Account permanently locked. Blockchain is forever, I typed back. Every transaction, every transfer, every attempt to hide, it's all there in the ledger. Permanently. Looking out over Silicon Valley's glittering landscape, I reflected on how Ryan's greatest weakness had been his inability to embrace the digital age. He'd seen technology as a tool to be used, not a force to be mastered. Tomorrow would bring more innovations, more partnerships, more opportunities to reshape the financial technology landscape. But for now, I savored the irony that his attempt to destroy our company had only served to reveal its true potential. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from our lead developer, new security protocol successfully deployed. The digital fortress is complete. In the end, Ryan's betrayal hadn't just failed, it had catalyzed our transformation from a traditional business into a digital empire. And in this new world, there was no place to hide from the truth encoded in the blockchain. Dawn broke over Silicon Valley as I prepared for the most crucial shareholders meeting in our company's history. The boardroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, was already filling with tense executives and anxious board members. All shareholders have been notified of the emergency meeting, my assistant whispered, handing me the final presentation. And the voting proxies are confirmed. I nodded, watching the last few board members file in. Ryan's allies were easy to spot. They clustered together, throwing nervous glances my way. They had backed the wrong horse, and they knew it. Before we begin, I announced, standing at the head of the massive oak table, I want to share some documentation that's just been verified by our corporate governance team. The screen behind me lit up. A complex web of ownership structures, voting rights, and shareholder agreements, years of careful planning laid bare for all to see. As you can see, I continued, the recent attempts to sell this company were not just unauthorized, they were impossible. The controlling interest had always been secured through a complex series of holding companies. The room erupted in murmurs as board members realized the implications. Ryan's supporters shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. My phone buzzed, a message from our legal team. SEC has approved the governance restructuring proposal. Green light to proceed. Furthermore, I pressed on. The board's voting structure, which Mr. Harrison attempted to manipulate, has been declared invalid by regulatory authorities. The true voting rights distribution is as follows. The next slide caused several gasps. Through years of careful stock purchases and strategic agreements, I had quietly assembled a controlling block of shares that Ryan had never noticed. Mrs. Harrison, one of Ryan's allies, spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. This changes the entire power structure of the company. No, I corrected him. It reveals the true power structure that has always existed, one that Mr. Harrison chose to ignore. The voting began immediately. One by one, Ryan's supporters were removed from their positions, replaced by executives who understood our true vision for the company's future. My assistant's message flashed urgently. Mr. Harrison's proxy just tried to submit an emergency motion, blocked by legal. Perfect timing. I pulled up the next presentation slide, our new corporate structure already approved by regulatory authorities and major shareholders. Ladies and gentlemen, I address the transformed board. Welcome to the future of Harrison Enterprises. I paused as the new company logo appeared on screen. Phoenix Innovation Group. The rebranding wasn't just cosmetic. It represented a complete restructuring of our business model, focusing on the technological innovations Ryan had dismissed and the ethical practices he had ignored. The funding is already secured, I continued, displaying the commitment letters from major investors. Our market position has never been stronger. As the meeting progressed, the remaining traces of Ryan's influence were systematically erased. New committees were formed, new policies enacted, new directions set. My phone lit up with a final message from Victoria Chin. Stock market's response is overwhelming. Your company's value just doubled. Looking around the boardroom, I saw the same realization dawn on every face. This hadn't just been about stopping Ryan's scheme, it had been about revealing the company's true potential. One last item, I announced, pulling up the final slide. Our first major initiative under the new structure, a global innovation fund focused on ethical technology development. The vote was unanimous. Even Ryan's former allies could see which way the wind was blowing. As the meeting concluded, I received one last notification from Jessica, still hiding somewhere. You didn't just outplay us, you rewrote the entire game. No, I typed back. I just showed everyone the truth about who really built this company. Standing at the boardroom windows watching the sunset over the city, I reflected on how Ryan's betrayal had ultimately freed us from the limitations of his vision. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new heights to reach. But for now, I savored the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what someone tried to steal. It's about building something even greater from the ashes of their betrayal. My phone buzzed one final time. The closing stock price, Phoenix Innovation Group, was soaring, carrying us all toward a future Ryan could never have imagined. And I was finally, truly in control. If there's one lesson to take from this, it's that power doesn't come from deception. It comes from knowledge, strategy, and patience. In business, as in life, the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply someone tries to bury it. Ryan built his empire on manipulation, thinking short-term wins would outweigh long-term consequences, but the real power lies with those who play the long game, who understand that trust, integrity, and innovation will always outlast greed. In today's world, where digital footprints never fade and transparency is unavoidable, the ones who survive aren't the ones who cheat the system. They're the ones who master it. So, to anyone facing betrayal, corruption, or doubt, remember this. Revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes, the most powerful move is simply proving that you never needed them in the first place. Build something so strong that no one can ever take it away. Good luck, and thank you for letting me be part of your story.